fairness, justice, good conscience, equality. These precepts characterize the doctrine of equity. In the history of equity, it is clear that the Court of Chancery began to assume jurisdiction over some matters based on their perceived limitations, narrowness, and rigidity of the law. The law here being the corpus of law as enunciated by the common law courts. The law as a means of social engineering is meant to be evolving and should be amenable, flexible to the dictates of practical realities and social conditions. However, during this period, the law was sterile and it paid superfluous focus to achieving procedural exactitude as against substantive justice. This void, this lacuna, paved the way for the intervention of the courts of equity. As the Court of Chancery, that is the Court of Equity, began to dispense justice, apparently to the consternation of the common law courts, conflict began to ensue between these two courts. Could hear the common law judges criticizing the Court of Equity for their imprecise and indeterminate principles that informed their decisions. This criticism had substance in them, for the judges at the Court of Chancery decided matters before them based on the dictates of their conscience. You would agree with me that matters of the mind are filled with imponderables, and you could hear the common law judges with disgust in their tone criticizing the Court of Equity and saying that it is all one, as if they should make the standard for the measure a chancellor's foot. That equitable decrees were based on conscience is not surprising, in view of the fact that almost all the early chancellors were bishops and apostles. Whilst few arguments could be put up to debunk these claims leveled against the Court of Equity for a long period of time, there came a point in the history of equity when lawyers with legal training were being appointed as chancellors, and these men took the pains of codifying these principles of equity, thereby making them fixed. One could not but hear Lord Eldon in the case of Guy versus Pitchard echoing that the doctrine of equity ought to be well settled and made as uniform almost as those of common law. He expressed his reservation and registered his displeasures to the view that the doctrines of the Court of Equity should be changed by different judges. This era of unification and consolidation fathered what is now known as the Maxims of Equity. That is, those rules, principles, doctrines upon which the Court of Chancery was deciding those cases are now what are regarded as equitable maxims or maxims of equity. And as we will see by the time we start to interrogate each maxim, we find out that some of these equitable maxims, some of them were developed by the Court of Chancery, some of them were just an extension or a consolidation on existing laws. But what is the significance of maxims of equity to the Nigerian courts? The Nigerian courts are courts of common law and equity. We don't have a separate court. Our court is a court of common law and equity. That is, we apply both common law and the doctrines of equity, and it's a given principle that when there is a conflict between common law and equity, then equity will prevail. But you must understand that in Nigeria, the term equity is used in two senses in the Nigerian legislation. It may mean the technical doctrines of equity, that is all these maxims, or it may mean, equity in the broad sense of what is fair and just. And this includes the phrase natural justice, equity, and good conscience. Equity was received into Nigerian law mostly by the enactment of local legislation. It is undesirable for us to go down historical lane to extract some of these reception laws. However, we must pay attention to the provision of section 45 subsection 1 of the Interpretation Act that simply states that the doctrines of equity that were enforced in England on the first day of January 1900 shall be enforced in Nigeria. So when we look at it, see that equitable maxims or maxims of equity or doctrines of equity are to be applied by the courts. And now we shall now proceed to examine these maxims one after the other in our subsequent videos. My name is Ori David, and you are welcome to my channel. And for those of us who have not subscribed, please click the subscribe button so that you get notified when we upload subsequent videos. Have a lovely day.